And joining us right now, the Roth and Orthopedics guest line from NBC Sports Philadelphia, Eagles beat writer extraordinaire, co-host of the Eagle Eye podcast, along with our other friend, Ruben Frank. Mr. Dave Zangaro joins us. How are you, Dave?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Are you tired of the Bijan Robinson questions yet? Or are you still just loving every second of them?
I feel like we do it every year. So it's, it's fun. The pre-draft process is fun. And I think you can get frustrated when you're, well, they're not going to do, yeah, but none of this it's all entertainment, right? Like we're all just trying to have fun. It's like mock drafts. Like, of course, mock drafts aren't right. Like there's never been a completely correct mock draft in the history of mock drafts, but we do it because we like to play with the possibilities, and it's fun to talk about the players. I enjoy that part of it. Now, you're going to ask me questions that I'm going to pretend like I kind of know the answer to. And the truth is, like, no one really knows what's going to happen. Like, Howie Roseman has no idea exactly what's going to happen on draft night, and that's what makes it so much fun.
Mm-hmm. See, here, I had you on because, I just thought you had your fingers on the pulse there, Dave Zangaro, and you're just like me. You have no idea. I consider, especially what you do, what Ruben does, of course, Ruben Frank, like you guys get pretty close to the need scenario with the Eagles. You guys get pretty close to the best player available and how they would fit the Eagles in that scenario. You guys do a pretty good job of staying in that ballpark right there when it comes to the Eagles. So, where do you lie on Bijan Robinson and the idea of him coming to Philadelphia? Let's get the hot name off the board immediately with that question. Where are you on Bijan possibly becoming a member of the Eagles?
He's a really good player. He would be, I think he's going to be a good pro, but it just doesn't line up with the way they look at positional value. And we can try to go, yeah, but this year's different because they have this great roster, and are they one piece away? They should really double down on the offense, knowing that the defense is going to take a step back, and you have this quarterback, and I get all that, and all that makes sense, but it is so rare to get a top 10 pick, and the Eagles don't expect to be there again for a long time. So I think it's like you kind of go back to, they want to draft a player at a position that they think can be like a cornerstone position, a guy that's not just here for 4 years or 5 years, but a guy who is like a cornerstone to build the franchise around. So, and you look at the shelf life of running backs, that's not what happens. And now, could Bijan Robinson be a great player? Yeah, he could, but that only gets you so far. And there's there are other aspects to this too, like the money. I mean, if they draft Bijan Robinson at 10, he'd have a higher cap hit this year than Miles Sanders would in Carolina. So, I think there are a lot of reasons why it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It will be fun, and I think he would make them a better team in 2023. But I don't think that's enough, not knowing what we know about how they view positional rankings in terms of value.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm on the same page with you. I think it would be very entertaining. You always want the sexy pick. Running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, of course, are always that sexy pick. But I see the Eagles stressing their defense. They love rotational players. I think they have guys that will be available at that spot. I don't consider Jalen Carter a rotational player, but I also don't think he'll be on the board there by number 10. Do you see the Eagles being aggressive in this draft, moving up if a guy like him starts falling a little bit? Or do you see them possibly trading back for more assets? Where are you on the Eagles and what they will do with that 10th overall pick?
I think there are 3 players worth trading up for. One of them is Will Anderson, who I kind of anticipate will be long gone before he even gets into range. But Jalen Carter and Tyree Wilson are two that you look at and think, okay, I don't know if they'll be there at 10. If they are, you run the card up. But if they're there at 7, at 8, I think that's an area where the Eagles can get into. And we've seen that from them. They've done that a ton in recent years. We've seen them do it. We did it last year, going up to get Jordan Davis. They did it the year before. Eventually, they traded back from 6, but then they ended up trading up from 12 to 10 to get Devontae Smith. They did it when they got Andre Dillard. Like they've shown a history of moving up and being aggressive. And I think there are players who that makes sense for this year. Now, you have to have 2 to tango, and that's what they're working on now. I mean, Howie likes to map out these trades, and I think most GMs do as well. They use the time before the draft to say, okay, if we're in a situation where the guy we want is at 8, call the Falcons and say, all right, let's work out if you're willing to trade out of this pick, and maybe a team like the Falcons would be because they have a pretty awful roster and they need to really replenish. Say, okay, here's what we'd give you to move up to 8 if our guy's there, and if he's a guy that you don't think is worth all these picks, you have that framework worked out, and then if that situation arises on draft night, you pull it off. I think it's important to note, though, that everything is in play because you don't know exactly how the board in front of you is going to go. That scenario is there. You know, a player you like slides into your range and you're able to get aggressive and take him. But there could also be a scenario where the Eagles are at 10 and they have 5 players that are all kind of in the same value rankings in their own minds, and another team likes one of those guys. Then you trade back 4 spots and you let one of those good players that you think are in the same class fall to you. So I think it kind of works together a little bit. And that's why I don't know if it's more likely they trade up or down. I think a lot of it depends on the way it goes. And I think that's the one thing Howie's shown he's really willing to do is to move up and down the board and get into where they feel like the value is best.
I know this is a tough question because we don't know who's going to be available at 10. As you just pointed out, things can move all over the place. But let's assume they say at 10. Is there a guy that if Howie Roseman did call you, Dave Zangaro, you say, hey, look at the way the board fell. Who would you be most pleased that we pick here at number 10? Who do you think that player is for the Eagles?
I'm not going to give you one. I'm going to give you a few. I think there are defensive players who are worth that pick. And the top of the list for me, I know I'm a little bit on my own here, is Myles Murphy from Clemson. I like him a lot. I don't really understand why he's not talked about as much. Nolan Smith has become a very popular name, and I like Nolan Smith too. I think he's another one who would be worthy of that pick. But those are the 2 edge rushers there that I like. And then at cornerback, depending on how the top 10 goes, I really like Christian Gonzalez.
Ooh, okay.
Oregon. And maybe I'm getting too blown away by the traits here, but the one thing he had to prove that he didn't prove at Colorado was that he had ball skills. He went to Oregon. He had 4 picks last year. He has everything from a size and athleticism standpoint that you'd want. And I know it's not like an immediate need, but it's a position where I know they haven't drafted that high in recent history. Heck, it's been since 2002. They haven't drafted a cornerback in the first round. But if you have a chance to get, in my opinion, the top player at that position, and you look around the league and you see, gosh, Sauce Gardner or Patrick Surtain or J.C. Horn playing at a really high level, you think, okay, I mean, that would make some sense. Darius Slay and James Bradbury aren't going to be here forever.
Mm-hmm. Understood. You're the second analyst to champion the cause for Christian Gonzalez. Certainly an intriguing pick there. Will the Eagles make 2 selections in the first round? What are they doing at 30? What do you think they're doing?
No, I don't think they'll make 2.
Okay. Same page again.
Yeah, it takes another team to want to trade up to that spot for sure. I look at like if Hendon Hooker is there at the quarterback, maybe a team wants to slide back into the first round and get their quarterback with that 5th-year option on that deal. We saw that in 2018 when the Eagles traded out of 32nd pick when the Ravens went up to get Lamar Jackson. I think there are reasons that teams would want that 5th-year option. So I could see them trading back. I wouldn't rule out a trade up, trade back. I think that's in play. If they trade up and they have to give up some picks to move up into the higher end of the top 10, then they can recoup some of that with a trade down from 30.
Okay. Easy enough. I look at this draft, and one of the things that jumps out to me is they go 125 selection or 125 picks without making a selection. Like it's a long fall off there from the 3rd round to the 7th round for this Eagles team. So there has to be some point, I would assume, with Howie Roseman dealing for more assets. Is that something we can also expect?
Possible, but I don't think it's a necessity.
Okay.
Honestly, I could see that because they're expected to have 12 picks next year, which is, I mean, I don't think they're going to draft 12 players next year. So they have future assets. If they want to play with them this year and trade future assets and move around the board, they can do that. But they have 4 picks in the top 100. That's rare. They haven't drafted 4 players in the top 100 picks since 2013. So it's just still a really good opportunity. Now, if there's a player that they really like in the mid rounds and they think, well, we got to get there to get this particular player, they can do that. I mean, they're going to have the ammo to be able to pull that off. So I think it's possible they get back into that big window, but I don't think it's something that like Howie desperately has to do.
Okay. Fair enough. I want to talk about this word culture that I keep hearing with all these free agent acquisitions. And I was reading your story on Contavious Street, who comes in to play defensive line for the Eagles defensive tackle position. And you did a great job of explaining the finances coming in here with Howie Roseman just being able to wheel and deal. But outside of Howie and the magic that he can do in that front office with the numbers, this buzzword keeps floating around there. Culture. Everyone's mentioned it that is signed with the Eagles. They like the culture here. And it might seem obvious when you've got guys in the locker room that have won a Super Bowl. You got guys in the locker room that have just been to a Super Bowl. When you hear that word culture thrown around, what's the first thing you think of when you think of this Eagles locker room?
I think about how it used to be under Chip Kelly. And that happens around the league a lot when you have a head coach that doesn't have, sorry to steal Jeff Lurie's term, the emotional intelligence. And culture is something this team thinks about. And it starts from the top. It starts from Jeff Lurie, from Howie Roseman, from the coaching staff. They want guys to buy in. And that's, I think, why we saw them have so much success last year with all those one-year contracts. Because a lot of times you have guys on one-year deals and they're kind of mercenaries. They're looking out for themselves and they don't really necessarily care as much about the team. But Nick especially has worked really hard on making sure these guys connect. And it's his favorite word, the steps to relationship build. And it really helps when you have guys in the locker room who have been there for a decade. Yeah, I mean, it's rare to have Jason Kelsey, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, and Lane Johnson all together for a decade. It doesn't happen in the NFL, especially not now. So those guys kind of set the tone. And I think that it also, we mentioned Jalen Carter a little bit ago. If you have concerns about a guy in the draft and whether or not he's mature enough to become a good professional, I think some of those concerns are alleviated a little bit when you have the culture the Eagles have and you have veterans. Like if you draft Jalen Carter and look, legal issues aside, I think the thing you worry about with him are those legal issues stemming from a lack of maturity? If they are, well, guess what? Now you're in a room with Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, and you're staring across from Jason Kelsey every day. I think that stuff matters, and it's not like the only reason you're obviously worried about talent first and foremost, but building the culture matters. And I think back to when Howie Roseman kind of undid a lot of the Chip Kelly moves. The reason he got rid of a lot of those guys was because they didn't really fit the building, whether it was DeMarco Murray or Byron Maxwell, Kiko, like those guys. You can become an Eagle without being a homegrown Eagle, but if you don't fit, you don't fit. And I think that's something that they've been very cognizant of, and it's worked. And you give them a lot of credit for it because it's not the same in other places. It really isn't.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I'm trying to crack the code on Sean Desai. I mean, we don't have a lengthy resume here of being a defensive coordinator. We have a blip on the radar, if you will, 1 year over there in Chicago. But what can you tell me about Sean Desai? What have you learned about Sean Desai, and what can we expect from Sean Desai as the Eagles defensive coordinator?
Yeah, it's really funny. They were in this situation this offseason where kind of a rare situation, I think, where the top internal candidate, who was Denard Wilson, would have been a much bigger shakeup schematically than the external candidate. You look at their backgrounds, and Denard has coached under some really aggressive coaches like Todd Bowles and Greg Williams, whereas Desai, I mean, you're really getting a version of the Vic Fangio defense, which has become very popular in this NFL. And a lot of those staples we saw under Gannon, especially in 2022. In 2021, it was kind of a hodgepodge defense, didn't have a ton of talent. But in 2022, we saw those Fangio staples. And that's what we're going to see under Desai quite a bit. Now, he's going to add his own wrinkles to that. You look back at Chicago, and especially like the fronts being different and kind of overloading fronts at times. There are a lot of things that he's going to do that are going to look a little different, but at its base, I think this defense schematically is going to look an awful lot like it did in 2022. Now, the one big thing we have to remember is this defense is not as talented as the 2022 unit. So, I mean, Desai could do a great job, and the numbers aren't as good at the end of the season. And I think we have to remember that whenever we get around to judging Desai's first year as defensive coordinator, that he has less talent than Gannon had in 2022.
Gotcha. One thing I'll ask about this, and this is a way too early question, but I know it's what everyone's wondering when it comes to a different defensive coordinator here. Is there one thing you can look at with Sean Desai and say he'll probably do this better than Jonathan Gannon, and whether that's being aggressive, which is another buzzword everyone likes to throw out there, blitzing, another buzzword everyone likes to throw out there. Is there one thing you can look at with him that goes, or maybe it's just too early? Oh, he'll be able to do this better than Jonathan Gannon. Adjustments, aggression, whatever.
It's a fair question. I think he'll be a little less rigid in philosophy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Gannon did things the way he wanted to do them, and at times it was frustrating, I think, to everyone, because you're like, well, this isn't working. Try anything else. Just try anything else. It's not working, and he wouldn't do that. I know this is a little more philosophical, but I think there were moments where Gannon was unwilling to try stuff. And I get the sense that Desai's kind of a problem solver, and he's willing to do things differently. And it doesn't mean he's going to blitz all the time, but I think he will be willing to try different things on occasion. And I think that'll help him. But I still go back to the talent. We don't know exactly what this roster is going to look like or what this defense is going to look like on opening day. They lost the entire middle of their defense. They lost Javon Hargrave. They lost both safeties. They lost both linebackers. So you're asking them to replace a lot. The mark of a good coach is getting the most out of what you have. So that's what I'm curious to see with Desai this year for sure.
All right, gotcha. Jalen Hurts' contract. He's still getting signed, right? No, he's not going anywhere. He's still going to sign a big fat contract and stuff. Where are we at on that?
Yeah, I still think it's going to happen this offseason. It goes a long way when the player and the team want it to happen. You look around the league, though, and there's a reason these contracts are taking a while. They're involved, and the Lamar Jackson deal is still hanging in the balance. And then there were the other two who were eligible this offseason, Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. If I'm the Eagles, I try to get it done before those two contracts come in, because that's probably the new floor, whatever those guys get. But I think it's still going to happen. I think there's still some optimism. They've been very upfront about it. I mean, they're not trying to get Jalen Hurts at a discount. They're trying to get this deal done. It's going to be massive. It's going to be 45, 50 million per year. That's just the going rate. The truth of the matter is that if this is a long-term deal, that 45 to 50 mil is, and if he continues to play at this level, is going to be an underpayment in several years with the expected TV money coming in. I heard Joe Banner say this, and I agree with him, that the fight here between the team and the player could be over the length of contract. The team presumably will want a longer contract, knowing that you want this great player longer, and you don't want him to have the ability to renegotiate, whereas Jalen will probably want a shorter deal. Bet on yourself a little bit. You still get a ton of money, and then you get back to the negotiating table once that new TV money comes in. Like you look at that Patrick Mahomes deal, and at the time everyone went, oh my God, they gave him a 10-year deal. I mean, there's no way he sees the end of it, because he's going to be massively underpaid very soon. So that's kind of just the way these things go, and it doesn't come together overnight.
No, absolutely. Make sure you guys get more of this brilliance with Dave Zangaro and everything he writes for NBC Sports Philadelphia, as well as Eagle Eye Podcast as well with our friend Ruben Frank. Dave, thanks so much. Good luck to you in the next 2 weeks plus when it comes to the NFL draft. I know there's going to be 1,000 names thrown at you, 1,000 scenarios. So best of luck, my friend. No better man for the job than you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Dave Zangaro joining us on the Ruffman Orthopedics guest line.